All right, it's time for us to begin, and we're going to start in 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17, this is where we left off. So probably a couple big things that we want to mention from last time that are going to lead into tonight. So let's talk about, I guess, first, what's happening in Judah, because what's happening in Israel is going to be more relevant to what we're going to start off with. So what's happening in Judah right now? Say it again. Good. Why? Because of Hezekiah and because he's turned the nation of Judah back to God, right? Are the people bought in? Yes, right, which is different than maybe what we've seen with previous good kings, right? You may have had previous good kings and the people are not bought in, right? They leave up the high places and they still worship on the high places. So that's the difference. So good things are happening in Judah. What about Israel? There's not in Israel, right? Like the way we left off was they were taken away. Why?
Because of the sins of Jeroboam and idol worship.
Yes, because they continued in the sins of Jeroboam, right? And so it's because they, continuously stayed unfaithful to the Lord. So this is where we're at. We're at the point in chapter 17 where the Israelites are taken out. The nation of Israel is taken out of the land. And it's like, well, what's going to happen with that? So we get to verse 24. And it says, and the king of Assyria, which, by the way, I should mention this, the king of Assyria, the Assyrians are the ones that took out Israel, right? So they're kind of the leading power, the invading power that's coming down. They've taken out Israel, and they brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the people of Israel, and they took possession of Samaria and lived in its cities. So they take out the people of Israel, and they bring in other people. Now, very quickly, what's different about these people? That's right. So they're not people who've made a covenant with the Lord. They're not people who know how to worship God. So they're going to be worshiping other gods. So we're going to summarize some of this, but when they worship other gods, how does that go? Not good. So what happens? What does the Lord do? Sent lions in to attack them. And apparently this is not just like a, one lion attacking one person kind of thing. This is widespread enough where they're like, there is a problem here. Like something needs to be fixed. And what's interesting is this word gets back to the king of Assyria, and the king of Assyria suggests what?
Send a priest back to teach them.
That's exactly right. Is that not interesting? So you have, first of all, you have the Lord punishing the people for not worshiping him and not fearing him. And then they're afraid of something. And the king of Assyria is the one that's able to designate, it's because they're not worshiping the Lord of that land. And so he sends back a priest. Now, it might also be noted that the priest he's sending back would be a priest from where? Who would know the ways of the Lord? Israel. Now, what do we know about the priest of the nation of Israel? Not great, right? But apparently, what we're going to see is, I guess, better than nothing. Because what we see is, verse 29. So verse 28 is where he sends back the priest, right? So they should fear the Lord. Verse 29 says, but every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the shrines of high places that the Samaritans had made. Every nation in the cities which they lived, verse 32 is what I'm looking at. Verse 32. So you have them making gods still, and then verse 32 says they also do what? They also fear the Lord, right? They also feared the Lord and appointed from themselves all sorts of people as priests of the high places and sacrificed for them in the shrines of the high God, or their high places. Sorry. So you have this, an interesting mix here, right? So they bring back the priests from Israel, and what do they still do? Yes, but has something been modified? Now they fear God, right? So what they've done now is they've said, okay, we'll start worshiping him too, right? We'll start worshiping him too. But it is interesting. It does say they actually fear him, right? They fear God.
In that verse it does. Then you go to verse 34, and they did not fear the Lord. So do you have a contradiction here?
I don't think so. So I think the idea is that they may have some sort of respect for the Lord, but I think in verse 34, they said that it says they did not follow the statutes or the rules or the law or the commandment. And I think it might be that they fear him, but they don't respect his law like they
It sounds
should.
like to me they may fear the lions, and that may be about the only aspect of fearing the Lord that
That's
they
right.
really do fear. I don't know.
That's right. But that's a good point because, so in verse 32, they feared the Lord. Verse 33, so they feared the Lord. And you look down at verse 41, so these nations feared the Lord. So clearly it's trying to show like they have some sort of commitment to the Lord, right? They fear him and respect him in some way. But like Gerald's pointed out, it's definitely not complete, right? And it's not about the law. And even in these other verses, you look at verse 41 here. So these nations feared the Lord and also served their carved images. And so, again, you have this over and over again, which is interesting because, at least to me, it's interesting. They're in this land because the nation of Israel got taken out. Why did the nation of Israel get taken out? Right, because they didn't fear the Lord. And they were kind of, their practice looked almost the same, didn't it? So, like, they would worship God. They'd offer sacrifices, that kind of thing. In fact, they probably kept the laws and the rules and commandments maybe a little bit better than these are because they would probably keep the rituals. But they would also worship carved images and whatnot. And so these people are coming in, and they have maybe I would say more of an excuse than Israel does, and that may be why they're not punished as harshly as Israel was. But you see here what we would say is the beginning, in even the verse that we read, this is the beginning of the Samaritans, right? Maybe keep that name in the back of your mind for when we get to the New Testament, because the Samaritans are going to come up quite a bit. They're going to be mentioned several times in the New Testament as a people that the Israelites did not like, right? Or the Jews, I guess at that point they'd be called, did not like. Yeah.
So making a point about the Samaritans,
Mhm.
just very briefly, in the New Testament, when Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman knows there's supposed to be a Messiah that comes. And she even wonders, are you the prophet that's to come?
Mhm.
And but what Jesus says to her, you worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. So you kind of see in her what we're seeing back here, that
Right.
she knows something about God, knows that a Messiah is supposed to come, but Jesus says, but you don't know what you worship, really.
Right.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
where that began.
That's right. Anything you want to say on that situation there at the end of 17?
Would it be fair to say that they love the world?
Yeah, I think, so you can't serve two masters, right? So if you're not serving God, then, yeah, you love the world.
Love the world, love the Father and not.
That's right. That's right.
You know, these people are bringing in their own customs, their own religions. And so I think when we usually see that term, fear the Lord, it's within the context of Israel, and it's that respect, that trust that they have in God.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's what's being displayed here. The fear, I think, is entirely, probably literally fear,
Mm-hmm.
because what God has struck them down with, these lions. So I think there's a terror that they have for the Lord, but they don't have that trust.
Yeah. And there could even be an element of respect of the power,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
But like what you're saying is it's not what God's wanting, right? It's just respect of power. He wants them to want to follow him.
Kind of like the Philistines feared when the ark,
Right.
when they started dying with tumors and
Yeah.
having plagues.
They believed.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it straddling the fence? Or are they straddling the fence?
I think so. I think he wouldn't make that many comments about they did this and they did this. They did this and they did this. I wouldn't think it would say it 3 different times if they weren't doing that.
When it says feared, could it mean like past tense, like they feared, and then on this day they feared. They don't fear anymore.
Yeah, it could
Fear
be.
means like past tense, like they did when they was on the fence.
Yes, I guess I took the past tense to mean like this is written after the events took place.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and so they feared, right? And then I don't know if it means that they don't now, but I think, that may be something to think about.
Yeah. The end of the chapter there says, so they do this to this day. So, this is written, in past tense, but even currently they still, until this day.
Yeah. At least when it was written,
Right.
like you said.
Right.
All right. So we're about to switch gears back to Judah. So Israel's kind of taken care of, at least for now, right? They're gone, and we know what's become of the land now. Then we go back to Judah. And like we said, who's in Judah right now? What king? Hezekiah. And what do we know about Hezekiah? Going good, right? It's good things. So really the beginning of chapter 18, I'm probably not going to read a lot of that because a lot of things said in chapter 18 are going to be similar to what we talked about last time. Talking about how he restores worship, how he restores the temple, things like that. There is one verse I think I would like to point out, though, and it would be, let's see, I think verse 7 would be probably the most important verse to look at. So it says, and the Lord was with him, talking about Hezekiah, and wherever he went out, he prospered. But then what did he do at the end of verse 7 there? Yes. So mine says he rebelled against the king of Assyria. It would not serve him. All right. Now here's why this is important. Well, first of all, it's important because it's going to play directly into what we're talking about tonight. But what do we know about Assyria that we've said already? That's right. They are powerful. Have they displayed this power? All right. Who have they taken? Israel. And several other people at this point, right? But they are powerful. And he's saying, I'm not going to serve you. Well, how do you think Assyria is going to respond to that? Yeah. How have they responded to basically everybody else who's done this?
Steamrolled them.
Steamrolled them. That's exactly right. And they're going to try to do that to Judah as well. So I think I'm just going to mention this before we get into, I think, are you good with starting basically in verse 13 there?
Yeah, verse 4 was one thing that kind of stood out to me, that bronze serpent, because, the last thing we saw out of that, which was a long time ago, was it was an object of salvation. And now what has it become?
An idol.
An idol.
Yeah.
An object of worship. And so, that, again, that's what, Judah, following in the path of Israel, had become. But Hezekiah is, he's reforming Judah, and he's changing the path that they've been on, the trajectory that they've been going down. He's completely turning them away from that sort of thing.
That's right. That's good. So before we get into verse 13, I'd like to maybe just point out something from the 2nd Chronicles account of this. And we're not going to read the whole thing there, but it seems like, well, I say it seems like, Hezekiah knows that Assyria is coming. And so what he does is he prepares. And he prepares by building up the walls, building up the towers, so building up their defenses. We also see that he stops up the waters, and he's stopping up the waters so that way when Assyria comes, they're not going to be able to benefit from the waters in the land, right? They're not going to be able to just lay siege outside a city and then be perfectly happy there. Like they're going to have to work to get water if they're going to get it. And so he's making preparations for this. I just want to point out here verses 7 and 8, because verses 7 and 8 I think are probably in some ways critical verses for understanding why the people are able to react the way they do in the story we're about to talk about. Because when we get to verses 7 and 8, do you have anything you want to bring up before then? All right. So we get to verses 7 and 8. We have Hezekiah speaking to the city and encouraging them. He says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed before the king of Assyria and all the horde that is with him, for there are more with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and fight our battles. And the people took confidence from the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. Really like this. So I don't think we have time to go maybe into all of it, but there are shades of so many past speeches. So be strong and courageous. Who does that sound like? Yeah, it sounds like Moses and Joshua, right? They both say that kind of thing. They're together when they're going in to conquer the land. I think whenever you have, there are more with us than are with him. Who does that sound like? That's right. Well, yeah, is it Elijah or Elisha? I thought it was Elisha, but now I'm not sure. I didn't look it up, so I don't know. But either way, the idea there is you have these echoes, and where's the confidence in all this? In God, right? And so you even have the contrast made there. With them is the arm of flesh, and they're pretty powerful, right? They're pretty strong. But with us is the Lord our God to help us fight and win our battles. And again, that sounds like language you would have at the conquest. When you have like the Lord is going to take care of these things for us. And I think about the Battle of Jericho. And it's like, well, who won that? Was that the Israelites? Well, no. I mean, they ended up benefiting from it, but they didn't win it. The Lord won it. And he's saying we need to acknowledge this as well. The Lord will be with us. And how does it affect the people?
It builds them up.
That's right. It builds up. They take courage. They take confidence from these words, right? So they believe Hezekiah and they believe in God. And I think that's going to help us understand why there are going to be some things that go on here. And not that things are always going to be great and they're just going to be skipping around, right? But they're able to be confident that things are going to be okay. You have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think the people are obviously rallying around Hezekiah. And we're going to see that as this unfolds because they're going to be tested.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's going to be an occasion where they're going to be tested and they're going to do exactly as Hezekiah instructed them right here.
That's exactly right.
They're going to be silent, not say a word.
That's exactly. So it's Hezekiah. You just read through everything you've read through so far, and you can't help but come away from the passages and understand it's like he is a good leader. It's like I don't know exactly what he's doing as far as I don't know exactly the way he spoke or the way he presented himself or anything like that. But he is a good leader, and he is able to lead the people in following the Lord. And maybe it's because of his devotion to the Lord, his desire to bring the people into that, and the Lord is allowing him to succeed in that. And of course, the people have their own free will on it, but I wonder if the Lord isn't helping him along the way. All right, anything before we go back to 2 Kings? So we're going to stick there are 3 different places where this story is told. We're going to stick mainly with 2 Kings because Isaiah and 2 Kings are basically worded exactly the same. Chronicles is much shorter, so it leaves out some things. And this is where we're already at. We're already in 2 Kings. So are we okay with that? Good, because I'm not going to Isaiah now.
Wasn't really a question,
Yeah.
was it?
All right.
Was Elisha.
Elisha. Okay. Yes. Gotcha. All right. So we get to verse 13 here. So it says, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will bear. And the king of Assyria required of Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house. At that time, Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the doorposts that Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid and gave it to the king of Assyria. I'm going to go ahead and read 17, and hopefully this makes sense in a second. And the king of Assyria sent the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh with a great army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. When they arrived, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway to the washer's field. All right, so Assyria comes. And what does Hezekiah do? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So it looks here like he caves in. He caves in, and he's like, the language is interesting too, right? Because he's like, look, I've done wrong. I shouldn't have done this. So what do you require of me? And then what does the king of Assyria require of him? Yes, and where does Hezekiah get it from? Right, so all of this is kind of going contrary to what we're thinking, right, with Hezekiah. It's like, he just said we need to trust in the Lord, and he's not doing that here. He's taking away the gold and that kind of stuff. Now, I want to point out, he does this, which, by the way, who does this sound like? What did his dad do? Did he not do the same kind of thing? Take gold from the temple and then give it to a nation and say, look, protect us. How did that work? It did not help him, right? It did not help him. Is it going to help Hezekiah? No. In verse 17, what do the Assyrians keep doing? They keep coming, right? And so that's the reason I read verse 17 is because you see him try this. It doesn't work. Should that be a surprise? No, because you should trust in God. And here you have maybe a moment of weakness. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but you see him try something, it doesn't work. He tries it through worldly means, it doesn't work. And that's what we should expect at this point. We see this over and over again.
Let me throw something else out there. And, we don't have any guidance as far as the narrative here. So we don't know exactly what's going on. I think all we can do is somewhat speculate at best. I'm not sure how the timelines fit together here with 2 Kings and what Austin just read from 2 Chronicles exactly. I wonder if, Assyria has a steamrolling coming south, and their ultimate destination seems to be Egypt at this time. And they're just steamrolling through everybody until they get there. And, Israel is gone. Now where is Assyria? Where is Sennacherib? Where is he located? Right now in the narrative. Lachish. That is Judah. That's about 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem. I mean, he's there. The army is there. Hezekiah's on the threshold of disaster here. And I just wonder if he's trying to buy time to carry out what he was doing there in 2 Chronicles, verses 1 through 6. And trying to fortify himself to get ready for what he knows is the inevitable. Now, we know that, that he trusts in God. He is a king that, is compared to David, and nobody after him is to compare to him. So, I think we have to have that somewhat. And of course, we know human nature, but at the same time, does God ever require us to do things to help ourselves in a cause? He does, doesn't he? God does not ever just take care of everything at all times. It's like the person that extends themselves in debt and then is in trouble with their debtors, and then he prays to God to get me out of this. And what they're doing is waiting on Publishers Clearinghouse to show up at their front door with a big cardboard check. That's not typically how it works. We're going to have to cut our expenses. We may have to sell some things. We've got to try to, make an effort to get things right, ourselves. And I wonder if that's what Hezekiah is trying to do here.
Could be.
Is trying to make as much preparation as he can, even though he's still trusting God. I don't know. That's just a speculation. It's a possible speculation.
I've also wondered if, like what you're talking about, like how the timeline works. It could be that you have an interaction with the Assyrians. The Assyrians kind of go back. So he tries this the first time. It doesn't work. And he says, okay, you know what? We're just going to trust in the Lord. So it might be that at first he didn't have his head in the right place. And then he comes back and says, okay, now here's what we need to do. I don't know.
Because as the story unfolds where we're at now, when they're approached, does Hezekiah seem to have any wavering in giving in to Assyria?
No.
Not at all.
No.
He's standing firm.
That's right.
Even in the face of such adversity, he's standing firm against Assyria.
That's right. And he keeps going back to the Lord.
Right. He keeps going back.
I don't want to spoil too much.
Right.
We'll see. Okay. So in verse 18, let's do 18 through 25. And when they called for the king, there came out to them Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the secretary, Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder. And the Rabshakeh said to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you rest this trust of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war? And whom do you now trust, that you've rebelled against me? Behold, you are trusting now in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you're able on your part to set riders on them. How then can you repulse a single captain among the least of my servants when you trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Moreover, is it without the Lord that I had come up against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. All right. So we have kind of the first, in some ways the first assault, but it's with words, right? And so he comes to him and says, who are you trusting in? Are you going to trust in Egypt? Are you going to trust in your God? Who's going to save you from us? Now, this is a great question. In fact, it's probably the theme question of this story. Who do you trust in? And how do you expect them to save you? So he brings up Egypt, and what does he say about Egypt?
Unreliable.
Unreliable, right? So a broken reed, you lean on it, pierces your hand, right? You think it'll keep you steady, but it won't.
And
it's going to
I
hurt
did
you.
read at this time that Egypt was propping up some of these city-states of Judah, just trying to keep a buffer
Yes.
between Assyria and themselves. So that may be why this was brought up.
That's right. And what's interesting, and you'll see this again, is he brings up, you can't trust them, but, we'll provide you horses, right? Now, I don't think here necessarily, I think he's still making a mockery of Judah here, because he's saying, we'll give you 2,000 horses if what? Yeah, if you're able to find people to put on them, which the idea is that your army is so small you can't do anything, right? But what we will see later on, they will make the argument, we can provide for you in ways that Egypt can't, in the ways that your Lord can't, will provide for you. And so I think here at least they're talking about their own wealth and saying, look at our power, look at what we were able to do. How are you going to stand against this? And then I would say, let's see, down in verse 25. So this last verse. Very interesting verse there, because what does he claim here?
The Lord told it to march up against.
That's right. We're on the Lord's crusade, right? We're on the Lord's crusade. Now, could there be any reason for them to make this claim? How successful has Syria been so far? Very successful. Have they taken anyone who's claimed to be Jehovah's people before? Yeah, they just took the Israelites, right? So you might look at this and say, well, the Lord did proclaim judgment on Israel, and he used Assyria to do it, so you can see how Assyria might think this. I don't think they really think this. I think they're saying it to scare the people, but you can see, like, there have been elements of truth in this past. But why did God allow Assyria to be successful against Israel? Because Israel wasn't doing what? They weren't worshiping. They weren't putting their faith in the Lord. And so what we're going to see here is we're going to see, Judah, are you going to put your faith in the Lord? Let's see how that goes. And that's the question. Who do you trust? Well, we're going to find out. Anything you say about that?
Yeah, it's propaganda at this point, trying to create doubt within the hearts of, because as we're going to see on this unfold, it's not just dignitaries speaking to dignitaries, but there is an audience in the background that's hearing this, what's being said as well as this unfolds. So this is just designed to create doubt within the hearts of the people.
And with that in mind, the next verse, what does it say? What did the delegates from Judah say? Because there are people listening, we want you to stop what? Yeah, we want to speak in Aramaic instead. We want to speak in Hebrew, right? We want to speak in Aramaic so that way the people on the walls can't understand. Now, what you see is how reasonable, maybe I shouldn't say reasonable, but how compliant is Assyria with this request? Not at all. So I kind of like this response. I say I love it, but it's horrifying. It says, verse 27, has my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the men who's sitting on the wall, who are doomed with you to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? It's like, woo, okay. You want to talk about like a chilling response? This is a horrifying kind of thing. It's like, no, we want them to hear. We want them to hear about their doom. These are bad people. And so, anything you want to say about that before we go to the next part?
What does that typically describe in there for, what has to transpire for people to go to such extreme measures? Yes, besiegement. So that's exactly what's being threatened here.
Yeah.
And this is typically the ultimate outcome of a besiegement.
Right. Yeah, like you're going to run out of supplies.
Yes.
And yes, that's right. So then he starts addressing the people. And verse 29 says, thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you out of my hand. Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord by saying, the Lord will surely deliver us, and the city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make peace with me and come out to me, that each of you will eat of his own vine, each one of his own fig tree. Each one of you will drink the water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die. Do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Seraphaim, Henna, and Iva? Are they delivered? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? Okay. The argument here is maybe twofold. Number one, he's telling the people, do not do what? Don't trust in Hezekiah and don't trust in God, right? They won't be able to save you. Argument number two is, who should you trust in? Assyria, right? Who should you should trust in? Assyria. Trust in us, and we'll make you wealthy, right? So, and again, the prospect he's just given them is like, look, if you're not compliant, you're going to be eating your own dung and drinking your own urine. But if you are compliant, then what will you have?
You can live in your own land for a while, then we'll take you to equally good land.
That's right.
And you can live.
Tons of produce, right? He describes all the different things. So you're going to have comfort, right? Which one sounds better to you? Living, right? That sounds better. Now, at the end, and again, we're going to see this a couple times, but he tries to provide evidence for this, right? It's not, to show, it's like, look, we're not just making claims here. This must be true. And the evidence he gives is, look at all these other gods. What have all the other gods been able to do? Nothing, right? We've been able, so Gerald used the word earlier, we've been able to steamroll them, right? No one's been able to do anything. So what chance do you think you're going to stand against us? And then what do the people answer? They don't answer. Why?
Because King Hezekiah told them not to.
That's right. So Hezekiah has told them, don't answer him a word. And the people listen, right? And again, you're thinking about this. If you're faced with this prospect, you might be thinking, well, I don't know, this sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Like, maybe let's take them up on this. But no, they don't answer. Their trust is not wavering. Now, does that mean, again, I said earlier, does that mean they're skipping around and everything's just dandy? No, because in the last verse, what does it say the delegates are doing? Yeah, they're distressed about this, right? And I think it's safe to assume that people are hearing this and they're probably reacting the same way. It's like, okay, this is not good, right? This is not good. But we see that their actions are showing we're not wavering right now. Anything to say about that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Any other comments before we get to chapter 19? All right, so in chapter 19, they bring this word back to Hezekiah. And how does Hezekiah feel about it? He tears his clothes, covers himself with sackcloth, and where does he go? All right, well, last time he went to the house of the Lord, well, I said last time we read about him going to the house of the Lord, how did that go?
He's taking gold and silver out of it.
That's right, he was taking this to send to Assyria. Is that what he's doing this time? He's like, well, dude, do we have anything left? Let's see if we can scrounge anything together. Is that what he's doing? No. What is he doing here? That's right. He's going to the Lord because he trusts in the Lord, right? That's what he's doing here. And we'll see this idea repeated a couple times. So, who do they send to? I know we're doing some summarizing here, but who do they send to? Isaiah, right? They sent to Isaiah. They explain the situation. And I want to read this in verses 3 and 4, I guess. Thus says Hezekiah, this day is a day of distress, of rebuke, and of disgrace. Children have come to the point of birth, and there is no strength to bring them forth. It may be that the Lord your God heard all the words of the Rabshakeh, whom this master, the king of Assyria, has sent to mock the living God, and will rebuke the words that the Lord your God has heard. Therefore, lift up your prayer for the remnant that is left. All right, I like this, and I don't know how much time we're going to have to get into maybe some of the specific language here and here throughout the rest of it. But what you see is, again, you see him say, look, I'm trusting in God. And I say this, I've said this before, but you see this in Hezekiah's speech, shades of the past. So what is his concern about Assyria? Well, what would you think his concern about Assyria would be if you were the king?
They're going to kill us.
They're going to kill us. But then when you look here, he says, Assyria, the king of Assyria, has sent to do what? Mock God. And what you're going to see, at least, again, a couple times through here, and I'll try to point it out, but what you're going to see is he's worried about the name of the Lord. And he's worried about how the nations view the Lord. They've mocked you. And it's not that he's not worried about his own people, but this is how he's appealing to God. He says, look, they've mocked you. Have you heard? Are you gonna respond? And then there again, I like the phrase because we talked about this at the Passover. At the very end, he says, "Therefore, lift up your prayer for the remnant that is left." Well, who does he mean by that? I think he means Judah, because what we saw at the Passover is who did Hezekiah view as God's people? Was it just Judah? It was Judah and Israel, right? And he's saying Israel's been taken, so for the remnant that are left, are you going to protect us, right? And then again, based on the sanctity of your name.
So you said there's shadows of the past?
Oh,
and I
yes.
think you're talking about David. Like when David hears Goliath.
I wasn't, but that's good.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
when David hears Goliath blaspheme God, it's almost like David says, well, now we know we're in good shape, you know?
Right.
And it almost like Hezekiah, he brings that up almost as if that gives him courage that if he's blaspheming you, you know?
I was thinking about Moses,
Oh.
like appealing for the name of the Lord, but that's great too. So you see this multiple times, right? This idea of the Lord needing to defend his name, and that's the basis on which he should protect his people, not just because his people are so great. All right. So we get a response, and we're going to summarize this, but basically, what is the response from Isaiah here? Again, maybe twofold. First of all, what are the people able to do or not to do? Don't have to be afraid, all right? And then as far as Assyria is concerned, what's going to happen on that front?
God's going to let them go back to their own.
Going to go back, and then what's going to happen to the king? He's going to die. Now, you'll notice this may not be like an immediate thing, okay? But this is what's going to happen. So he's telling them, I will take care of you. He's heard. Okay. So then what we see do you have anything you want to say through that?
No.
All right. So then what we see through 8 through 13 is the Rabshakeh comes back. He tells the king about this. There's one more speech given by the king of Assyria. This time, he's not addressing the nation as a whole. He's not addressing the people. Who's he going to address this time? Hezekiah. Now, I want to point this out because I think he knows now. He's like, okay, the people are going to do whatever Hezekiah says. So if I'm going to get to the people, it's going to have to be through Hezekiah, right? So if I'm going to shake the people, I have to shake Hezekiah first. And so you look here in verse 10. Thus you shall speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah. Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you by promising that Jerusalem will not be given to the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the lands, devoting them to destruction. And shall you be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them, the nations that my fathers destroyed, Gozan, Haran, Rezeph, and the people of Eden who were at Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, the king of the city of Seraphim? I can't say that one. And the king of Henna, or the king of Iba. So I think this is an interesting argument here. So it says maybe a few things here. Don't be deceived by God's promise of safety. Look at the other lands. Look at the other gods. And then, and I think this is what he's built up to. Look at the other kings. What has happened to the other kings? Yeah. And I think this is one of those ultimate mafia moments, right? Where you make the threat without making the threat. You know, it's like, hope nothing bad happens to your building. And so it's like, you know, so, but I think that's what's happening here. He's built his argument. He's like, and look at these other kings. And it's implied, what do you think is going to happen to you? So he's trying to shake Hezekiah here. Now, unfortunately, we're going to summarize some of this. And I think it's worth maybe at least reading through 19. Is it going to shake Hezekiah? It depends what you mean by shake, right? Does it bother him? Yes. But it doesn't break him. So you look at verse 14. Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And what did he do? Went to the temple, and what did he do with the letter? Spreads it out before the Lord. I love this. Because the imagery is like, look, this is out of my hands. This is in your hands now. Look at what he said. You evaluate it. What are you going to do about this? He presents it to the Lord. Because you talked earlier, Dad, about David. It's like Goliath was challenging the Israelites, right? Not in David's eyes. David says, you're challenging the Lord. That's what Hezekiah is saying here as well. It's like, it may look like it's a challenge against me, but it's a challenge against the Lord. And look at how he prays here. O Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations in their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore, they were destroyed. So now, O Lord our God, save us, please, from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Lord, are God alone. So again, he looks at this and he says, what's the real issue here? Is he challenging Judah? Is he challenging Hezekiah? That's what he thinks he's doing, but what is he really doing? What is the king of Assyria really doing? Challenging God. And again, this is what I was talking about earlier. It's like he's calling on the holiness of the name of the Lord and how that looks to the other nations and saying, do something. Do something about this. So that last verse there. So save us from his hand so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Lord, are God alone. Because all these other gods that he's referencing are not really gods. And that's why they were destroyed. But you are God. And you can save. So do it. Anything you want to say about that?
You know, it's as if he's pointing out, you know, here is a golden opportunity for you to prove to all the earth who you are. You know, a world empire that, you know, we have never seen before has come against us. And we are but, you know, just tiny in comparison. We have no hope but through you. Glorify your name.
That's right. So he gets a response. And I'm going to read just a couple of things here from this. Verse 20, Isaiah responds, he says, this is what the Lord says, your prayer to me about Sennacherib, king of Israel, I have heard. So that was the question. Have you heard? Have you seen? I've heard. And then what does the Lord say? What's going to happen?
That the king is going to fall.
That's right. Assyria, they're not going to succeed. I'm going to protect you. And I'll read this. Again, we have to be very careful what we're reading here. But 28, because you have raged against me, he's talking to Assyria right now, by the way, and your complacency has come to my ears, I will put my hook into your nose and my bit in your mouth. I will turn you back on the way by which you came. Now, why would that language be important? That's what Assyria does to their captives. And the Lord says, I'm about to make you my slave. Like what you do to your slaves, I'm about to make you my slave. And you're going to go back. You're not going to be successful. And then, and again, we don't have time to get in all this, but he basically makes a promise to Hezekiah saying, I will protect you. You will make it out of this situation, and it will be soon. You'll be able to come out of Jerusalem, and you will bear fruit. And then what we also see here is that he's not going to get close. Talking about the king of Assyria, he's not going to get close. Now, how is this situation resolved?
Quite unexpectedly and suddenly.
That's right. So that night, what happens? Angel of the Lord comes and does what? 185,000. Huge amount, right? The king of Syria is saying, if you could put 200 or 2,000 men on the horses, that'd be great. And it's like, Angel of the Lord takes 185,000 of Assyria. They were so proud in the size of their army. It didn't help them. And what happens? They do turn back. Now, I want to say this too. What happens to the king of Assyria? And his sons, where? Oh, so did his God protect him? Oh, that's interesting. So who do you trust in? Who do you trust in? That was the question. Hezekiah and Judah trusted in the Lord, and how'd that turn out? Great. Assyria thought they were amazing, right? They defeated all these other gods. The king, worshiping his God, gets killed. Can't protect him. So, I think that's about all the time we have. Anything else you want to say?
I want to go back to verse 28 for just a sec. We've got a minute or two.
Mm-hmm.
But where he says, God, you know, foresees and says, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth and will turn you back the way which you came. Now, why does a horseman put a bridle and a bit in a horse's mouth? Yeah, to be able to control it, be able to steer it which way he wants to go. Now, Lonnie, I remember you talking about it in the past as far as that concept of hooking your nose. What was the custom of the Assyrians when they would take their captives?
It was easier to lead them when they were had a hook through them.
Yeah, they could control them. You know, they didn't have to worry about rebellion or anything. But God describes that he's going to do the exact same thing to Assyria.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens here? 185,000 in one night is wiped out.
That's right.
And, you know, what happens? I mean, there's no more fight in them. They're done. Mm-hmm. They go back home. I mean, it's as if God literally put that hook in their nose and took them back to Nineveh because they had no fight left in them. They were defeated.
Yeah. That's right. All right. Thank y'all.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.